Hi and welcome to Yarnspirations. I'm Mary Beth Temple for Hooked for Life, and in this video we're going to take a look at the multi-textured Afghan made with Bernat Elise EZ. Now, you may have tried this yarn before, but I bet I have stitches to show you that you haven't seen. We're going to go over the twisted knit and twisted purl. We're going to learn how to make eyelets with a well-placed bind-off. We're going to do the crisscross stitch, and we're going to see about bobbles. While we're getting ready, make sure to subscribe to the channel for fresh content weekly. Let's get going on our blanket. The first stitch I want to review is the twisted knit stitch. As you know from having worked with this yarn, the way you do the knit stitch is to bring the yarn from the working yarn, hold it in the back, bring it from back to front through the loop, and that is how you make a knit stitch. However, for the twisted knit stitch, we are going to twist the loop that we are working through one time to the left before we bring that yarn up. So, like a regular knit stitch, but one twist first. It just gives you a little bit more texture to look at. So again, here's my loop. I'm twisting it once to the left and bringing the working loop through the way I normally would. So nothing is changed on the way you bring the loops through, only how you hold the loops that you're working through. So you can see, if you look closely, that instead of, we call each side of this a leg of the stitch, so their legs are crossed. That's why it's twisted. The leg of the stitch is crossed. It makes it a little denser, a little less open, and is a nice textured look. So let's go take a look now at the twisted purl. There is my first row of the twisted knit. Now to make the twisted purl, same deal as for a regular purl stitch in this yarn. We're going to have our working yarn in the front instead of the back, but instead of just pulling one loop front to back through the loop on the work, we're also going to twist it. We're going to continue to twist on the left. So there's my twist. There's my stitch. Here's the next available loop. There's my twist to the left. Bring the working yarn through. Here's my next available loop. Twist it to the left. Bring the working yarn through. There's my next available loop. Twist it to the left. Bring the working yarn through. That is all there is to the twisted purl stitch. Now the next thing we're going to look at is the eyelets that we use in the eyelet section. Okay, let's take a look at how to make the eyelets that we're going to use on the 6th row. So this is in the eyelet stitch section. Now I don't have the twisted stitch border at the beginning and end of my swatch, and obviously my swatch is not 71 stitches wide, it's 13, because that's what will fit on camera. So again, as this is an intermediate pattern, I know that you know how to do a lot of this stuff. I just want to go over the parts that you may not have seen before. So on the 6th row, working from left to right with working yarn in front, work 6 twisted purl stitches as described in the 2nd row. Did that. Bring working yarn to the back. Pull next loop from working yarn up from behind through each of the next 3 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3. So there's my 3 stitches. Pull the 3rd stitch through the 2nd stitch, binding off the 2nd stitch. So I'm going to take this third guy that I just did, and I'm going to pop it through the second one, essentially binding off that second stitch. That second stitch is gone now, and my eyelet is going to be right there. Now, pull next loop from working yarn up from behind through each of the next 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, pull 4th stitch through the 3rd stitch, which binds off the 3rd stitch. Repeat from asterisk across to the last 6 stitches, and you're going to work 6 twisted purls. So let's just look at that eyelet one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, bring the 4th through the 3rd. So if you are counting your loops, which I know a lot of people like to do, because you're essentially binding these stitches off when you make these eyelets, you will have fewer loops on this row than you did on the previous rows, and that is not a problem. That is exactly how it's supposed to be. So then in the case of your blanket, you would then bring the working yarn to the front and work your 6 twisted purl stitches. Now, moving on, for the 7th row, working from right to left with the working yarn in back, work 6 twisted knit stitches, which I'm not going to show you because you know how to do that. Pull next loop from working yarn up from behind through the next stitch. And again, in my case, I'm going to have to do a couple to catch up because I don't have the same number that you do, so just trust me when I tell you. In my case, I need to do 3, but you're going to follow the instructions exactly as written and do the 1. Then it says, skip next loop from working yarn, leaving it unworked above the bound off stitch. So let's see if we can come up real close. There's my bound off stitch. Here's my loop that I'm just going to leave that hanging out there. Then I'm going to go to the next loop and work through the stitches until I come to the next bound off stitch. So all of the stitches that we took away, there's my bound off stitch. And again, you'll follow the exact numbers in the pattern. There's the loop that I'm going to leave unworked. So when you're all through here, you're going to have the same number of loops that you started with. So when you're moving from left to right, you're binding off those stitches and creating the eyelets, but when you're moving right to left, you are leaving some unworked loops here and there in order to replace those stitches. So I started with 13. I should have 13 now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And there's my eyelet. So once again, you're going to follow the pattern exactly as written for the eyelet section. The next stitch I want to look at is the crisscross section. Now we've done that in other projects, but I just want to go over it real quick. Now that I've done some subsequent rows, you can really see how those eyelets pop. It's a really cool technique. So doing the crisscross stitch, we're now on the 17th row, working from right to left with working yarn in back. You will do 6 twisted knit stitches at the beginning of the row because again, you're going to have this border. Then you're going to cross the next stitch in front of the following stitch from right to left. So in front, from right to left. Holding cross stitches in position, so I'm doing that with my left hand or non-dominant hand. pull next loop from working yarn up from behind through each of these 2 crossed stitches. So you're still working the loops from the working yarn in the order that they come up. You're making the cross by manipulating the stitches you've already worked in. So let's see that again. Taking my right hand loop, putting it over the left hand loop from right to left. Oh my goodness, I'm tangled here. Give me 1 second. There we go. And then we're just pulling the working yarn up. 1, 2. Next 2 stitches, right over left. 1, 2. And we're going to do that all the way across. Now we're moving from left to right on the 18th row. You've done your border stitches, and here's our little crossed stitches from the row before. And now it says, you'll do your border, and it says bring working yarn to back, skip next stitch, leaving that unworked, cross next stitch in front of the following stitch from left to right. Holding crossed stitches in position, bring the next loop from the working yarn up. So we're doing basically the same thing as we did on the previous row, but we're going left to right this time instead of right to left, and we're staggered by 1. We're crossing not the same 2 that crossed before, but 1 from one pair and 1 from the next pair. And when we get to the end, we're going to skip 1 stitch, leaving it unworked, and then do the border. So left over right, and the next 2 loops from the working yarn. So that's all there is to that crisscross pattern. You're going to go back and forth, repeating the 17th and the 18th row. And again, following the instructions. And then I want to take a look at how to make a bobble. All right, there's a closer look at our crisscross stitch. Now let's take a look at that bobble. On the 30th row, we're working from left to right. With the working yarn in front, you're going to do those 6 twisted purl stitches. Bring the working yarn to the back. Pull the next loop of the working yarn up from behind through the next stitch. Now we're going to make a bobble as follows. Pull the next 3 loops from working yarn up from behind through the next stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3, all through the same stitch. Let's see if my third one's a little twisty here. Here we go. So there's my 3. Now working right to left, pull next loop from working yarn up from behind through each of the same 3 stitches just worked. So we had 1 stitch. Now we have 3 stitches, and now we're going back in the opposite direction. So 1, 2, 3. Stack center, so there's my 3, 1, 2, 3. Stack center stitch of 3 stitches on top of the stitch to the left, so the center guy goes on top of the stitch to the left. Pull rightmost of these 3 stitches up from behind through the 2 stack stitches. So center guy goes on the left hand guy, right hand guy goes through both of those, and it says 2 stitches decreased, bobble complete. So we went from 1 stitch to 3 stitches, back to 1 stitch, and this is going to stick up. It's going to give me texture. That's exactly what we want it to do. So it is going to stick up, and that's how we want that to happen. and then a pulled next loop from working yarn up from behind through each of the next 3 stitches. So let's try that one more time. So we're going to go through each of the next 3. 1, 2, 3, and we're back to the asterisk. So we're going to pull 3 loops through the next stitch. 1, 2, 3. So we went from 1 stitch to 3 stitches. Now we're going to pull 1 loop through each of those 3 stitches, going from right to left, the opposite direction from what we had been going in before. 2, 3. Now we're going to take the center stitch, pop it on top of the left stitch, grab the right stitch, pull it through from back to front, those 2 stitches. Now we're back down to 1 stitch, and we'll continue to move on across the row. So that's all there is to the bobbles. So I hope this little primer has given you a good idea of all the stitches that you need to make the Bernat Elise Easy Multi-Texture Afghan. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to do when it's cold out. You get this lovely thing working on you. You've learned twisted knit and twisted purl and eyelets and the crisscross stitch and bobbles. So doing this not only gives you a beautiful blanket to have, it gives you a lot of technique to work on in the future. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm Mary Beth Temple for Hooked for Life. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and we will give you fresh content weekly on knitting, crocheting, and other yarny stuff. Bye-bye.